I think that I want to move on to his foreign policy because I'm sure for our audience, well, that's a little bit of the more interesting point here. We have this tweet here from AFP News Agency, and it's just a headline, but I felt like this headline is a good like tweet summary of how a lot of the pro Biden people are feeling about foreign policy. And it says, contrary to Donald Trump's impulsive policies in the Middle East, Joe Biden is expected to shift back to a more conventional U.S. stance and re-engage with Iran, redrawing regional geopolitics. So, what do you think about that, Will?
Yeah, I mean, there's one part of that that sounds, better than the other parts, and sounds sort of plausible that that Biden might try to re-engage with Iran simply just because, like, I think Biden's going to want to model some of what he does on what his former boss did, Barack Obama, and maybe like revive the Iran deal or something. That's sort of one of Obama's legacies. And so I don't see that as being entirely implausible that he might try to re-engage with the Iranians. It's not a very hard bar to pass with what Trump's done with the U.S. policy toward Iran. He's made it like maximum, he's called it the maximum pressure campaign. He's really ramped up the hostilities. So it wouldn't take much to start to scale that back. And so I think that is possible. Biden would do that. However, all this stuff about redrawing regional geopolitics, that I would be completely opposed to. That's way too big of a role for the United States. And so, and some of the things they call Trump impulsive about are some of the policies that we favor, like, pulling troops out of certain theaters, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. Syria obviously didn't really work very well. He left troops in the oil fields and stuff, but he did oversee some drawdowns from Iraq and Afghanistan. And those are the things that people often call impulsive. And so if Biden's not going to do those things, that probably suggests he's going to, he's going to be more open to leaving troops in various places around the world.
Yeah, we've already seen him signal like to Korea that he's not going to withdraw any troops from there, and I think that's the probably the place I'm most concerned with Biden coming in. As far as starting a war, I mean, he could continue to increase tensions with Russia and China. Although who knows? There's speculation that he could be better on the new START treaty, and has signaled that
Right.
he would be willing to extend that. Although at the same time, he's constantly complaining about how Putin's the worst person in the world, and so it seems like if you're gonna have just a short time to negotiate this thing, which it doesn't seem like Trump will have the attention to give to it in the next couple of months, I'm not sure that it's going to be able to, survive. Like if Joe Biden's going to be able to come in and immediately start talking to Putin, or if all the rhetoric, anti-Russia rhetoric from the Biden administration is going to kind of blow that. I think he'll be aggressive against China, or maybe even more so than Trump. Maybe he won't end the wars in Afghanistan, Syria, or even Yemen. Although he has signaled that maybe he's willing to do that. He could escalate somewhere. I mean, there's protests going on in Nigeria. Yeah, I've seen a lot of left wing people kind of interested in what's going on there, but I'm most concerned about North Korea, where Joe Biden has said that his policy is that Kim Jong Un is a thug. And look, he's a terrible dictator, right? And is responsible for all kinds of suffering of his people. That being said, if you're the person that has to negotiate with them, probably not the best starting point. And of course, had Trump like called Angela Merkel a thug, people would have been like, "Oh my God, how can you say that to somebody you have to try to get along with and have flipped out?" But yet Biden says that, and he says that he's not going to negotiate with North Korea unless they give up at least part of their nuclear program, and that's not going
Yep.
to happen. And so, at best, then the next 4 years are going to be more the I think very flawed and ridiculous policy of strategic patience. But my concern is that as North Korea continues to advance their nuclear program, the Biden administration is going to feel increasingly pressured to act in some way. And I mean, it's already maximum sanctions, so what else could you do but then some kind of preemptive strike? And at least I believe Bob Woodward has reported that the administration was considering that at the end of it. So it's not like it's that far off to think. So that would be like my main concern. But as you said from that tweet, if he does get back within the Iran nuclear deal, that could be huge. Although I'm
Yep.
skeptical of that because he's gotten some endorsements on the world stage, and of course I think like Boris Johnson was first. But a very fast person to come out and endorse the Biden win was Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and
Right.
so that kind of made me think that maybe not so fast on getting back in the nuclear deal because we know Israel is very opposed to that.
Yeah, we will see. Like there'll be some tensions, like Biden's like willingness to appease the Israelis versus his willingness to try to like pursue Obama's legacy on the Iran deal. That's going to be a tension. And then with Russia, like Obama's legacy also covers New START, but then there's also all this crazy Russia hysteria and hatred of Putin. So there's another sort of like tensions going in the opposite direction that So I guess we'll just see, and we'll see. I mean, like I'm pretty much treating it as a foregone conclusion that Biden won, but like again, there could be some crazy plot twist that we see. They're going to be challenging it in the courts. So.
Yeah, right. I mean, I would say this is the one disappointing thing I've seen. I can't say one disappointing. This is something disappointing that I've noticed about the coverage of the election, and that is there are these allegations from right wing, mostly sources, saying that there was some kind of voter tampering or voter fraud, and
Yeah.
vague allegations from the president around it, and everybody just says, "Oh, it's not true. Oh, it's not true. Oh, it's not true. You can't believe this. Elections are free and fair. Elections are free and fair." This is, of course, 4 years after RussiaGate, where they constantly said the elections weren't free and fair. But anyways, after they're reporting on that, nobody's actually like really taking the time to debunk it. And in fact, from what I've seen, it's mostly the right wing sites fact checking themselves where you're getting like the Sharpie markers in Arizona at least weren't as big of a deal as initially thought. There was the apparently human error of some voter software of inputting data in Michigan that gave 6,000 additional votes from Biden, taking them from Trump. That's been switched, and so I don't know. It's just I guess the opportunity that Trump is presenting by drawing this out in the courts is for the mainstream media to not only say and tell the American people that the elections are free and fair, but demonstrate it through journalism and say that, oh no, the election monitors were there or they were invited. The votes in Philadelphia weren't invented out of nowhere. Look, we could look at all the votes and see the unique signatures and all this kind of stuff. But there's none of that going on. It's just like this straight up dismissal, and I don't know. I'm pretty bummed about the way that's being treated, because I think it's going to add to the part of the Trump base that believes the election was illegitimate. I think this really fuels it. The fact that nobody is doing a good job debunking it.
Right, I agree. Like I've seen a couple write-ups, like the Times had something that addressed a couple of the claims, but you're right that like overall they've been very, very dismissive about all of it. That we can't even consider this. And there've been all kinds of weird things, like some of the companies that run these voting machines doing updates suddenly the day before the election. I saw that in at least one case. It's just like there's some things to look into, I think. Like I don't know why does the elections are very complicated, like elaborate things that like have a lot of areas that could fail. Maybe it's not even fraud, maybe it's just like incompetence or an error or something.
Right.
But we should be able to ask those questions and not be censored on the internet or something.
Right. Well, especially when it's such a unique election where you have the largest amount of absentee and mail-in balloting, maybe in any election in history. I don't know if there's ever been an election that did such widespread mail-in balloting. And so that
Yeah,
doesn't
I don't
mean
know.
that the election is fraudulent. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump won the election. But if people
Right.
are skeptical, like look into their claims. Some people are pointing out, hey, there's more people registered to vote in some of these Wisconsin districts than actually voted. That seems odd, but
Right.
and maybe that's I then see some people explain that, saying that, hey, it's that same day registration, but at the same time, like you said, better coverage of it will lead to more truth getting out, but that's not gonna happen. And I like as you said, this is a giant government run apparatus, so I'm sure there is plenty of errors and mistakes made in the whole
Yeah.
voting system. And who knows? I mean, you could do a recount, Biden could end up with more votes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's not
Exactly.
impossible either. I don't know anything else on the whole election Biden stuff. One thing I will say is that judging by what we've seen of Biden on the campaign trail, I am somewhat curious with how much foreign policy that he's actually going to deal with himself, or how much he's going to delegate to people he puts in his administration. Although I know, like in the Obama administration, he was somebody that kind of like took point on foreign policy and was very involved in the Obama foreign policy, and has always served on like the Armed Services Committee. So maybe he will dedicate more of his attention to that, or something like that. But I think the personnel in the Biden administration will be very important. So I'm going to be keeping an eye I've even heard horrible, horrible rumors of, Biden talking to Satan himself, Dick Cheney. So that's
Heard the same thing. And yeah, I do think Biden does fancy himself as someone who knows things about foreign policy and stuff. So we may see him, get involved. But I am very eager to see too who his appointments will be and what his cabinet will look like, because that will drive obviously a lot of his policy.